you. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Pastor's Weekly. My name is Coursey, and I'm the director for Thrive Training. And Thrive is a compilation of resources and materials and events that are designed to equip you as leaders to be fruitful and effective and efficient at your ministry. In your ministry, and that means keeping your joy levels high, keeping the joy levels at home high, and we want you to be able to finish well. And I think that's a desire for all of us, actually, is to hear those words from our dear Lord. Well done, my good and faithful servant, and use the talents that He's given us in a very successful way for the kingdom. And so part of what we do here on the Pastor's Weeklies, which I'm very excited about, by the way, is we interact. We talk about joy, and we talk about how the life model training applies to you, your ministry, your congregation, your family, your life. And in many ways, joy is pretty much, it's kind of like a life preserver that all of us need. We're designed for joy. And if you're new with us today, I just want to welcome you. This will give you, what we're going to do today is talk about joy. And specifically, we're going to look at joy or the lack thereof as it relates to our communities and our congregations. So I just want to say I'm glad that you're here. And what I'm going to do is we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to talk about this particular topic that's coming up, and then I want to interact with you. I want to hear from you. You might have some questions about what I discussed, but I want to talk about how does this apply? How does this training apply to you, your life, your ministry? And so what we tend to do is have a guest each week, and so we might have a guest speaker who talks about a specific aspect of their ministry and how they're using this training in their life. But today I'm actually my own guest, so I'm going to talk with you the whole time, and hopefully we'll have some good interaction about halfway through. So it's going to be fun. I'm glad that you're here. I'm going to move along here with my topic. And my topic today is called 5 Hazards of a Low Joy Congregation. And I got to say, this is a very exciting topic for me because I have spent time as a pastor. I work with a lot of pastors, and I work with a lot of church leadership on how to help churches be a place of joy, a place of life where people are actually glad to be together. That's the essence of what joy means, is that you're the sparkle in someone else's eyes. And when there's joy, we feel connected. And when there's a lack of joy, we hurt. And when we hurt, bad things happen. And so what I want to talk today is what can you expect? What would you see in a congregation that has low joy? And I'm going to compare this to some of the hazardous conditions we find with driving a vehicle, right? And what I'm going to talk about today applies both to leaders as well as congregants. So obviously the focus today is on leadership, but I want to say what I'm going to talk about applies to both. Now there are specific issues we can look at as it relates to leadership because obviously there's a difference. But I'm going to just kind of paint this general picture of what would you expect if there's low joy in this community, in this congregation. And that's what we're going to look at today, all right? So one of the things we're going to look at involves distracted driving, right? I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you've done it. Whether you're eating when you're driving, whatever it is, people get distracted. And that is actually one of the top reasons for auto accidents. And how this relates with what we're going to look at in terms of churches and congregations involves immaturity. Because immaturity means that we're not anchored. Something's missing. I haven't fully developed some part of my identity or even my character. And so there's some weakness that as soon as some weight starts to be put on that foundation, problems will be around the corner. And so we're going to look at immaturity and how that relates with low joy. Another common reason for accidents involves drunk driving. Let's face it, there's unfortunately a lot of that going on there. People use poor judgment. And when they drink and drive, it's a really bad thing, and a lot of families have been devastated by drunk drivers. And the same thing happens within our congregations in terms of driving relationally while we're intoxicated, so to speak, which basically means we struggle with hidden addictions. And hidden addictions are also catastrophic for our relationships. So we're going to look at how hidden addictions are also a source of low joy. And then we have rain and fog. I know you've driven in conditions where there's rain, the roads are slick, and then there's fog. You just can't see very well. Conditions are hazardous. And in a congregation, what else is hazardous with low joy is the strong and the weak do not mix. Those who are strong and those who are weak do not play together. And so we're going to look at those having different camps within the community that actually hinders joy and is also related to low joy. Then there's this thing called black ice, and that's more for those of us who are in states that have some colder weather in the wintertime. And what black ice is, it's basically a hidden threat. And when you're driving and you hit black ice, you have no control of your car. I've hit lots of patches of black ice in my time, and it's scary. Because you really have no control. And when we have no control emotionally or relationally, we don't recover from our upset. We don't recover from what we feel. We don't know how to manage what we feel. And so joy gives us strength. The more joy I have, we're going to look at how that would apply with this black ice scenario or this low coping capacity. Very hazardous relationally when we don't know how to handle what we feel. Then you've got people, which is also another top reason for accidents. They run through a red light or they race through a stoplight. They're not paying attention. Most likely, they run a stop sign, they hit another vehicle, and then you have an accident. People are hurt. It's unfortunately more common than we'd like to see on the roadway. And what I want to relate that with in our communities involves a lack of character change where we just keep going. We keep going at the same pace, at the same speed, relationally, but there's no change in our character. And then we kind of prefer our comfort zones. And whenever we prefer our comfort zones, as we're going to look at today, we're not going to have some of the character change that we would want to see. So let's get started here on our first little spot. We're going to look at distracted driving a little more, which I compare with immaturity. When people are texting or speeding, that's just going to be trouble. It's so frustrating. I'm sure you've seen it before, where you're driving down the road, you see a car that looks like they're distracted, and you pull up next to this car, and somebody's there texting on their phone while they're driving. I see this especially with teenagers, and it really is a scary thing. I find myself praying for those people and anyone who crosses their path when I see them do that. But what happens with immaturity in our congregations means that work starts to become a higher value than relationships. And so there's this kind of an atmosphere where we serve, and serving's good. Serving's a very good thing. But like anything, when serving starts to become a higher priority than relationships, burnout's right around the corner. Because what happens is people aren't anchored with immaturity. They aren't anchored. Because there's missing tasks. My body continues to grow, right? I'm in a 38-year-old body, but that doesn't mean that I have the 38-year-old maturity, right? I could still be stuck at infant level maturity even though I'm in a big body, which means I don't know what satisfies. Maybe I haven't learned to do hard things, or as we mentioned before, I don't know how to get back to joy from my upset. And these are all skills and tasks that we have to learn, actually, and we learn these from other people who have them. And so the lack of maturity means I'm just adrift at sea. I'm not goal-oriented. I float around. I don't really have a sense of who I am, and that's not expressed when I'm upset very well either. You also have this dynamic where being right trumps being relational. As churches, we have to have our ducks in a row doctrinally. We need to have a very good theological clarity about what we believe, who we are, and how this relates to Scripture. I cannot stress that enough. But what I'm talking about here on being right has to do more with how people interact together. When there's disagreements, can we resolve those disagreements? So if you're confused about something and say, Chris, I don't know if joy is a biblical thing. Can you help me understand how joy is biblical? Well, sure. Let's sit down, open your Bible. Let's look at some passages, and let's really flesh this out. But we can have this relational approach too. We might not be on the same page, but we're going into this interaction with our relationships being bigger than our problems. And so I've come across a lot of churches where relationships seem to be very low on the scale, but being right is very high on the scale. And what that means is people don't feel connected in a community. It's easy to leave the church because there's no real anchor. There's nothing keeping me here. And what you'll discover are wounds are right around the corner when this is a high value within the community, where I just want to be right. If I can just prove you wrong, then I feel special. I feel important. I feel a little puffed up about the whole thing. What happens is I might want to be right while I run you over, and that's not good. We want to try to have that healthy balance here. And you'll also see that there's a loss of focus when there's a lack of maturity because we're not anchored. What tends to happen with congregants especially, or even staff members, people feel seen and defined by what they do, by what they can contribute. But I don't feel a part of this family. I just feel like I'm here and I'm important as long as I'm the one that makes the coffee on Sunday mornings, or I'm the one that helps with the offering, or whatever it is. There's this dynamic that people feel I'm as good as what I can contribute. And the moment I no longer contribute, then I don't feel like anyone's going to notice if I'm gone. And so we're going to have a lot of pain that happens when those joy levels are low. And what will also happen are you'll have people who become critical. They're very critical of the service. They're very critical of the worship. They're very critical of the message. They're very critical of the carpeting in the lobby. The list just goes on. We're not glad to be together, is what's happening. Or people don't feel that joy from the leadership. They don't feel that joy with each other. Maybe the leadership don't feel that with each other. And so there's a lot of floundering that goes on when maturity is lacking. And the results of immaturity means that I feel like I just have to perform in order to stay connected. And that, that's not a good feeling with my wife and I. If I feel like I am loved by my wife as long as I clean the house, that's not going to feel like unconditional love. And what's the worst thing about all of this is what frequently happens is we also come to interpret this is how God sees me. God loves me as long as I do all the right things, but the moment I don't do all the right things, he wants nothing to do with me anymore. And that kind of goes against what Jesus did on the cross by keeping a relationship bigger than a problem. And so I know I'm generalizing here. I'm kind of painting a big picture, but these are some things you will see very common when those joy levels start to drop. I want to look at this other one called drunk driving, which I compare with hidden addictions. The thing that's so painfully frustrating about drunk driving is drunk driving could be avoided by the intoxicated person asking for help, calling a taxi, asking someone who's not intoxicated to drive them home. I mean, think about it. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? Well, when we're thinking about hidden addictions, and addictions in general, addictions are a broken approach to fix problems. Addictions are there for a reason, all right? They're there for a reason. And it's a very unhelpful way that I've learned to manage something or to solve a problem, all right? And so if you have somebody who's drowning, you don't just tell them to swim harder, all right, or to quit splashing. You actually want to throw them a life preserver. And so what happens in churches where those joy levels are low, people don't feel like I can share my struggle. I don't feel like I can ask for help. Or I'm afraid to ask for help because I'm afraid of what you'll think of me. And low joy levels means that there's an increase in artificial, or what we also call pseudo-joy. And that means what Ed Corey has brilliantly come up with, called this acronym called BEEPS. And BEEPS refer to behaviors, experiences, events, people, and substances. And these are all things that I use to make me feel better. All right. So as a pastor, right, I might feel better when I'm looking good, right? I might feel better when I give my good sermon or whatever it is. And those are, giving good sermons and looking good, really not a big deal here. The problem is when these things start to replace what I really need, which is genuine, joyful relationships where I give and receive. It's safe to give and it's safe to receive. And when it's not safe to give and receive or to share my weaknesses, then I feel like I have to hide these addictions because I'm ashamed of it. All right, I might have some shame. I don't want to share this. So as a leader especially, it's really hard because you're put in that position where whatever you share can be held against you, so to speak. So I work with a lot of leaders who really find it difficult to share their weaknesses because their weaknesses may be pounced upon or used against them, or they might lose their job. So as a staff and elders, we want to kind of create that environment, starting at the top where it's safe to share weaknesses and actually find healing and grow, but also with our congregations, right? When you have a congregation where it is safe to be weak and weakness is not considered a bad thing, people will feel like they can deal with this stuff and start to grow some joy. But when we don't, when we do have to hide these kinds of things, we feel isolated, both as leaders as well as congregants. We feel isolated. And I don't feel like I'm, if you really knew this part of me, you wouldn't like me anymore, is a very common feeling for those who wrestle with some of those hidden addictions. So the other hazard we want to briefly look at here is rain and fog, as I mentioned before. And this is, I'm comparing this to what happens when the strong and the weak do not mix. I don't like driving in the rain or the fog. I've had many near accidents because of the road conditions. But you also will find that there's a lot of accidents and a lot of casualties in our congregations when those who are strong, who have the resources and actually have some maturity, when they do not connect with those who are weaker, what tends to happen is there's not that transaction of giving and receiving life. Because those with the resources, part of how they continue to grow is sharing and giving life. Those with few resources or little maturity, part of how they're going to grow is also receiving and then giving. But when the two camps do not interact within that same community, what you're going to see are these dynamics where the weak stay stunted. I like the term that Ed has come up with, where there's this kind of a recovery ghetto, so to speak, within the church. Like those with the pain and problems are over here. Those of us who are fine and have it together, quote unquote, are over here. The goal, I believe, what God wants in His body is for those two groups to interact and really share some life together. Because what happens are the weak will remain in their pain, which leads to kind of a problem-centered focus, right? When I'm hurting, all I can focus on is what hurts, right? It's that simple. If you've ever had, I recently sprained my back, and it's just been a very painful ordeal. But when my back's hurting and I'm sitting here trying to focus on my computer, all I can think about is this pain that's really throbbing. And that's what happens for those of us who are kind of find ourselves in this place of pain and in this camp over here. We're just used to focusing on what hurts. We don't know how not to a lot of the times. And then you have the strong, those of us who actually have some maturity. What tends to happen is we remain in our comfort zones. We stay where it feels safe for us to stay. Which leads to kind of keeping up an appearance. I remember growing up in the church, and I always believed that I had to have my best look. I had to have my best smile, my best clothes. I had to have the best for God and for people. The problem was I didn't feel like I could bring any dirty laundry, so I wanted to hide my dirty laundry. I didn't want people to know that I had dirty laundry, and actually that kept me weak. That kept me stuck. And that's also a common pattern. And I love God's solution, by the way, to some of these dynamics. If you read Isaiah 58, he talks about a certain kind of fast. What is it that God wants from His people? And you'll notice it's actually caring for the weak as a common thread throughout that chapter, and how those of us who seem to have it all together, we need to share that life. We need to give some of that life. And those who don't have a lot of life to give, it's time to receive. We want this mutuality between the two camps here, so that it's actually one camp, one body. So there's a lack of a transformation zone because a comfort zone is replacing that. So transformation is actually not happening. We may know the words, we may have the best music and the best sermons, but there's something missing. I still go home and I still fight with my wife. I still might have anger issues. I'm still struggling with those hidden addictions. There's not that change. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about the transformation soon. But I do want to say that lack of growth is often attributed to a lack of faith. So a lot of people who are stuck, they might hear it or they might feel that, well, if only I had more faith, if only I tried harder, if only I prayed more, if only I served more, if only I made better choices, everything would be fine. Now those are all good things, but again, if you're dealing with somebody who's drowning, they don't need a sermon. What they actually need a life jacket to get them to shore, and then they need that, where was God in all of that, and what does God have to say about some of this stuff? But when you have people who are drowning, we have to really find out what do they need to get on their feet. And the result of this kind of this separation of the camps, so to speak, means that people feel guilty. People will end up feeling guilty, particularly those in the weaker camp, because they feel like, what's wrong with me? I'm a failure. God's not going to want to share life with me, and all kinds of unhelpful stuff can happen. So I want to move along because I want to talk about black ice, which is also hazardous. If you've ever been on black ice, you know it's a very scary feeling because you have no control of your vehicle. You can press the brake, you try to turn your wheel, you're just sliding wherever momentum will take you. And I want to use this as a kind of a lens to look at what happens when emotions and conflicts cause ruptures, because I have a little capacity, which means I have little ability to manage what I feel or recover from what I feel. And when that happens, people will tend to avoid certain emotions. So if I grew up with a raging parent, it's very likely that I'm going to have a hard time dealing with angry people. I'm going to want to people please. I want to keep them happy. I don't want to make them mad. So I'm a people pleaser. Or if I don't know how to get back from shame, then when there's a conflict or when there's a disagreement or a rupture, I feel stuck in my shame. I don't know how to get back to joy. And so what you'll find are people fail to resolve conflicts or even misunderstand why bad things continue to happen. So for many churches that I've worked with, there's been these patterns over the years where a leader or a staff member or somebody has acted out and gotten themselves in some kind of trouble. They don't know how to explain it. So what tends to happen is we put more rules in place. All right, so we put more rules in place to try to avoid these disasters from happening again. The problem is the disasters keep happening. There's no language for joy. We don't realize that the reason these train wrecks are happening is because there's a lack of maturity and there's low joy, and trouble's always around the corner when those joy levels start to sink. So what happens, our problems become very big. And you have an environment that's a very fear-based environment because we don't know how to manage what we feel. If I knew how to manage what I felt, I can feel upset, but I can get back to joy, and it's okay. And I can still keep a relationship with you, and I can still remember what's important to me. So there might be a fear of upset. We don't want to upset the pastor. We don't want to upset certain elders. We don't want to upset certain congregants because they have resource or they're an important part of the church. Whatever it is, as I frequently will tell pastors, don't make decisions out of fear. We have to look at the fears that motivate us because they will hamstring us in some way, shape, or form. And there's a fear of hopelessness, quite possibly. I don't know how to sit with people when they feel hopeless about something, and so I stay busy, right? We have that's part of the beeps phenomenon, where if I don't know how to manage some of this stuff, I find other ways to deal with it. So I may stay busy, I may overwork, I may whatever it is, but it's solving a problem in an unhelpful way. The goal is just to learn to manage what I feel and to know it will not kill me. Or as the psalmist would say, I will not die but live. And that's actually where we find God being right there with us during those vulnerable moments. But the result of this low coping capacity, as I call it, means that people feel disconnected. You may have been going to a church for 10, 15 years, but you don't really feel like people know you, or we just feel disconnected somehow. I don't feel seen by other people. I don't feel seen by the leaders. There's just this disconnect, and I don't know how to put my finger on it. Those are a lot of things you'll hear when those joy levels are low, and people have a hard time knowing how to manage what they feel. Not a fun dynamic. And the other big problem we have, which is another big reason for auto accidents, involves running red lights. As I said earlier, running a stop sign. There's this lack of character change. People are just going forward as they have always gone forward, struggling with the same old things. There's no change to their character. And when there's no character change, it's kind of like, what's missing? There's a reason for it. What's missing there? And so people keep driving and they just don't change. They don't update according to conditions. And as a leader, as many leaders I've talked to, this is a source of frustration for them because they're giving them good, solid biblical teaching every week. There are small groups. There's all this stuff there, and they don't know why aren't my people changing? Or maybe why aren't I making those changes? What's missing here? And it's very frustrating. So we keep doing the same old things because this is what we've always done. And we're not looking at what could we do more or what could we do differently. And so the needs aren't fully met. When you have a lot of performance going on in this kind of a dynamic, because I have to talk a certain way or I have to look a certain way, but deep down inside, it doesn't feel real. And so I frequently, when I teach this stuff to weekends, I say, if you really want to get to know me, talk to my wife, because she has to live with me. I can lead a retreat or preach a sermon, and I can look good and sound good, and but if you really want to get to know me, ask the people that I spend the most time with. You'll know, what is Chris really like? How is he like when he's tired? How is he like when he's grumpy? How is he like when his back hurts? So, we need that kind of a joy-based environment where it's safe to be myself, good, bad, and ugly. People are still glad to be with me. Now, it doesn't mean they endorse my malfunctions. It doesn't mean they endorse my sinful habits. It means they love me, and they're glad to be with me, and that creates a kind of environment where I can actually start to make some changes. So the result of this lack of character change is basically people feel comfortable, and they avoid anything that threatens their comfort zone, which is very much related to some of these other these points that I'm looking at today, because you still have those different camps. It's threatening to some degree. So let's move on here to joy as a solution. One of the things that's really exciting to me as a trainer and a leader is joy is God's solution relationally. Like, we have a God who's glad to be with us. That is real. I mean, that is true. That is very biblical, that God is glad to be with us. And joyful relationships with God and with people provide us with some resiliency. And I want to talk about resiliency for a moment because it's a kind of an exciting term. Resiliency, if you look it up in your dictionary, basically has two definitions. It means an occurrence of rebounding or springing back. And that means, I take that to mean in this context that when problems happen, when things go wrong, we bounce back. We spring back to who we were created to be. One of the biggest frustrations about low joy means that it hinders us from being the people that God created us to be. We become crispy with low joy. We become rigid. We become fearful. We just hurt. We're overwhelmed. It's not fun. We're not designed to stay stuck in those kinds of places for very long. We are designed to spring back to joyful relationships with God and with people. This does not negate the fact that people hurt and pain happens and bad things happen that aren't supposed to. It just means we're designed to bounce back into relationship with God and His people. The other neat definition about resiliency is it refers to the physical property of a material that can return to its original shape or position after deformation that does not exceed its elastic limit. That's a pretty neat definition, we could spend the whole hour talking about that one. But it means that when things go wrong, and they frequently do, we return to the people that God's created us to be. We remember what's important when there's a conflict. We remember what's important when things go wrong. And so low joy equals a very limited ability to recover from distress, which results, again, with a lot of fear-based motivations. And this need to justify, which is also very toxic for us pastors, for us leaders, for our congregations. When there's this incessant need to justify, it's really hard to work out problems with other people and to grow in our relationship with every time when you bring an issue or a problem or a need to someone and they justify it. They don't take responsibility, or they turn the tables and say it's about you. You can kind of see this theme in Scripture where when we try that approach with God, it doesn't work too well. God's solution to some of this is to be able to confess our grievances and confess our sins to God and to each other in a very humble way. It just seems that justification is not a very pleasing approach to God, which means it's probably not a very good approach for how we do life as in our communities. So what I recommend, I'm going to give you some steps here, because we all like steps. What do I do with all this stuff if I can relate to some of this low joy dynamics in my life or my ministry? Give people a language for joy. You know, people intuitively know what joy is when you give them an example. So I might say, you know, my son this morning before he left the house, his face lit up and we gave each other a big hug, and his voice, you know, said, "Daddy, Daddy," and I was so glad to be with him. It made my day. When you start giving examples where we felt genuine, authentic, real joy, we get it. People get it. But there can be a lot of confusion or vagueness about what is joy. You know, what does it look like? What is not joy? So help to clarify with people what is joy, and how can we actually use joy as a springboard for life and for health and for growth in our relationships with each other as well as in our relationship with God. And, you know, I've had, with this new Joy Starts Here book coming out, we've actually had pastors already start to preach sermons based on this material, which has been really exciting because they're introducing joy as a way of life and as a value for their congregations. And I had one pastor locally who was actually teaching this and preaching this in his church, and he really took advantage of the opportunity to call out his congregation and raise a banner for his people to be protectors. He said, "I want my church to be a church of protectors, and I don't want us to be predators or possums," which is another thing that happens with low joy. That would make more sense if you read the book. But he said, "I want to be a place of a community of protectors," and he's been taking active steps to make that happen, both in the leadership as well as in the congregation. And so you can also provide a context by starting Joy Starts Here groups. That's the fun thing about this new book is every chapter has assessments, every chapter has exercises, every chapter has Bible studies. And it's a great way to start introducing this because for many people joy's foreign. We live in a world where it's easy to be low joy. Let's face it, it is. And there's a lot of good reasons to be low joy. And so we want to work on changing the tide, both personally as well as corporately, for starting some joy. So you can create a culture for what we call the transformation zone, which means that the weak and the strong interact, and there are tender responses to weakness. And so when somebody brings a weakness to us, we don't say, "Well, you really messed up, didn't you?" You know, or "Well, shame on you." We don't do, that's not a tender response. We say, "Wow, this sounds really painful for you. What do you need? How can I help you? How can I pray for you?" You know, that's a tender response. So we want that kind of a culture. And also, the third ingredient is we practice Emmanuel peace, Emmanuel shalom, whenever we lose our peace, whenever we lose our shalom. And this means that we actually talk to God and look to God to restore our peace when it's gone. So if I have a meeting coming up this afternoon that I'm dreading because it's with a certain congregant that's very angry, and and I don't want to lose this beloved family, I might feel this dread. Then one of the things that'll help me go into this meeting is actually talk to God about it. God, what do you think about this meeting? We call that the Emmanuel lifestyle. if you're new to the training, which also would make a lot more sense in this book. But I want to throw out some discussion here. I've taken a good chunk of time presenting a lot on your laps here. So I want to kind of open up this forum for a minute and just talk to you. Do you have some questions about what I shared? My question for you, I guess, is what hinders joy for you? Let's face it, there are a lot of things that hinder joy and that rob our joy. But when you think about starting joy in your life, in your family or your ministry, what are some of the obstacles? Do you have anything that you just say, yeah, how would I start joy with this dynamic? Let's put that out there. If you have questions, you can jump on in, or if you want to type your questions to Denny, she can let me know what's on your mind. But I want to hear from you. What would you say helps your joy, or what hinders your joy? We can throw that in as well. What grows your joy? Like I gave an example with my family and my sons. That grows my joy.
Okay, well, Zoanna has had her hand up for a while, so I'm not sure if she meant to have her hand up or not. Okay. So we're going to attempt to unmute Zoanna. Maybe she can chat with you.
Welcome. Can you hear us, Zoanna?
Yeah, I can hear you. I kept losing you guys all throughout our internet connections kept going. So I just put my hand up so that when you would know that I was back, because I didn't know if you could tell I was gone.
Well, I'm glad that you're back. I'm sorry that happened.
Did that hinder joy?
Yeah, that sounds like that could hinder joy.
It definitely hindered joy, because this information is really important to me personally, and for the kind of stuff that I think God has me do within my church. So,
yes.
So I just wanted to get to be a part of it. So yeah, my joy was hindered.
Well, I want to let you know, this might help you return to joy, that Denny records the joy stream so that you could listen to the recording later.
Awesome. Thank you.
You'll be able to get the content that you missed during those moments.
That's right.
Yeah, it went down four times.
Oh, that's a joy drainer right there.
It
Sorry that
was.
happened.
No, I appreciate knowing that, though. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to leave you unmuted, Zoanna, so you can mute yourself and then jump back in when he has more topics that you might want to join in on.
Yeah, so I really love to hear from some more people. What
see
what
if
helps your
Stephen's
joy?
available. Stephen,
are you there, Stephen?
he had typed in a question earlier about he said just work. Any other examples? Like if you gave an example at work, so he's wondering if you have more examples.
Was it during that? I'm guessing it's during that moment where what tends to happen. I hope this is what Stephen's referring to. One of the dynamics that happens, which is kind of a slippery slope, because it's a very good thing, but it can become a joy robber, and that means that there's an emphasis on tasks. Yeah. There's an emphasis on work that needs to be done, and when we become very task-oriented, it's very easy to forget about the people who are in the middle of all those details. And so I find a lot of disgruntled congregants in some of these dynamics because they don't feel seen, they don't feel appreciated. In fact, I just read about an interesting study that was done for businesses and workers, and what's the biggest problem? What's the biggest hindrance for workers in a work environment? And the lack of appreciation was the top of that list. In other words, they don't feel appreciated for what they do. They don't feel seen. And so working is good. You got to have goals. You got to be goal-oriented, but not at the cost of relationships. So that's kind of the healthy balance you want to find, and make sure those appreciation levels are high for those who are doing the work, whether it's your staff or the congregation or volunteers. Just keep the appreciation levels high, and you'll find people are invested much more so in the results and getting the work done.
Mm-hmm. That could also be at work. That could also be at home. I mean, housework or to do the honey to-do list. If that becomes more important.
That's it. That's a great point. You bet. You bet. I love watching my wife's face light up when I express appreciation for what she does, and I know how it can bother her when I fail to express appreciation. So yeah, we keep that a high value. I think you're just going to have much more satisfaction all around. Good, yeah.
All right,
Anybody else?
Christine Turner.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Christine.
Yeah, Chris, you must, one of your love languages must be acts of service then, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it is.
I think, immediately this came up in my spirit when you had this put across. I mean, I saw it on the computer. What hinders joy for you? And just, I think giving counsel as an older mentor coach in a lot of situations in counseling, that you give, wisdom that you have received from the Lord, and it works, and you've applied it and have understanding. And then people say, well, that's not exactly what I wanted, or, well, I'll think about that. And then basically it's just an unteachable spirit. It's something that, people come to you for counsel and you give your best shot at it, and they walk away and go, no, I don't think I'll do that. And then later it plays out into not a very, mature situation, and they come back after it again, and really that was the best I had. I don't have anything else for you. What was the last thing I told you? And it's just like this unteachableness, and
that's a good point.
Yeah.
I suspect a lot of leaders can relate to that one, where they're trying to offer these solutions and people don't always receive some of the solutions or respond to what you're trying to offer and help them with. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head for what a lot of people will certainly, that'll resonate. Yeah. All right. Anybody else before I move on here? I'll put another question out there as everybody's chewing on this, is basically what hinders joy for your congregation? Like whether you're a pastor or not, what can you see, or maybe previous experience, what hinders joy for the body? What would you identify? What comes to mind? Any thoughts? Remember, joy means we're glad to be together. Right?
So Anna, we got you back on.
Anna, are you with us?
Zoanna.
Zoanna.
Yeah, yes, I am.
Right.
I think the biggest thing in our congregation that hinders joy is making everybody have to look the same, be in the same box, and putting God in a box. Like, he's not allowed to be God and do what he wants in the ways that he wants, I think, has really hindered joy in this congregation.
Yep, that will do it. That will, everybody's got to wear the same mask, or everybody's got to look and be a certain way, and even God gets kind of placed into that little small box.
Exactly.
That will rob joy. Yeah, you're right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That'll be a joy robber right there. Yeah, what else comes to mind for all of you? What hinders joy? Maybe it's not your congregation. Maybe it's another congregation that you were part of or that you know. What are some of those hazards? We've talked about black ice on the road, fog and rain, and there's hazards relationally for our congregation. What hinders that joy?
Zoanna, if you could mute yourself again.
Somebody's TV in the background there. We might want to mute.
I'll go ahead and mute her.
And I want to throw out, as we think about what hinders joy, what comes to my mind at least is fear. What role does fear play in all of this? Because most, if you would have asked me when I was pastoring what fears I had, I probably would have laughed. Because I didn't consider myself a fearful person, an anxious person, I would not have considered myself having fears. But when I started to mature and look at what was hindering me from growing, I realized I did have some fears. I was afraid of failing. I didn't want to be a failure. I was afraid of being stuck in hopelessness or shame. So when we think about fears, I want to kind of redefine that a little bit in terms of just what practical things bother you that hinder you. And I find with us guys especially, we don't like to talk about our fears. It just doesn't feel like a manly topic to talk about for some reason, but we do have fears, whether we can identify it or not. Our brain learns unhelpful lessons from painful moments, which often spill over into the present. So what comes to your mind? What hinders joy, or how does fear play? A very common one I'll throw out there actually is just when I introduce this to some leaders and some teams and some groups, there's this immediate fear that what I'm talking about is we have to now be emotional. Suddenly, I'm a spiritual person, and now you're telling me that I have to be emotional and I have to get in touch with my emotions, and that's not appealing to me. That's actually not what I'm suggesting, but I notice that's a common fear that is there, especially for us leaders, is, what does this look like practically, and does it mean that I now have to somehow be emotional, and we have all these negative ideas of what that looks like, usually based on previous experience to some degree. So I would say that's another way that fear will rob the kind of culture, the kind of environment that I'm introducing to you today. Anybody else before I move on? Any questions in general, or any thoughts about these things? I'm trying to shine the light on some pretty key questions here that
Christine,
would help us.
you've got your hand up again. I went ahead and unmuted you again.
Okay. Talking about this fear issue, which is it's big, and none of us like to admit it. I don't. I'm speaking for myself.
Yeah.
But I think the fear of fear is sometimes big, because when you don't want to appear weak if you're in a certain situation where you're trying to, be the protector, and
Yes.
And particularly if it's an area where you tend to be more fearful or lack faith or whatever, and coming towards someone, or someone coming toward me in their weakness and expecting me to be strong, fear just makes me put the strong mask on, and we're both weak together, and I find ourselves in the same boat, and so having learned that, sometimes being afraid to appear to be afraid.
Yes. That's a good point. That's a very good point. It's it reminds me. I might have shared the story before. When I was early in my pastoral counseling career, I was sitting with a client who was in a lot of pain, and I tried to fix her pain. I was giving her the best counsel I could come up with. I was giving her Bible verses. I was just thinking of everything I could to try to comfort her and help. And it actually worked against me, because she got very frustrated and agitated, and she finally, in the middle of her tears and her distress, she looked at me and she said, "Chris, will you stop trying to fix me? I don't need you to fix me. I know those Bible verses. I just need you to sit here with me." And that was all she wanted. That's all she needed, was just to be in that room without trying to fix it, but just share some of what she was going through. And you know what? The most amazing thing happened. First, it was hard for me to do that, by the way. It was so uncomfortable for me to be able to sit there with her in that level of distress, because I didn't know how to manage my own level of distress there. But when I sat with her and just basically sat across from her, and I didn't say anything, but I shared some of that sadness, within a matter of minutes, she was connected to God. She felt like God was right there. She could breathe. She started to find the hope, and really everything she needed happened once I got out of the way. And it was a clear reminder that God's called me to be His witness. God's called you to be His witness. He hasn't called us to fix problems, per se, when it comes to people. We can't fix people. We can't. People with problems, we can't fix it, but we can be there with them. And as Paul would say, weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. And but the fear things, that's a big one. Yeah, that's a big one. But it's very liberating as we start to fly this kite, so to speak, that I'm suggesting and offering today. It's really cool what happens. This stuff transforms us. This transforms our families. This transforms our leaders. This transforms our congregation. God has given us joy as a gift.
Christine,
Yeah,
if you want to speak still, you're still unmuted.
Oh, okay. Okay. No, an awesome point. That witness that's just awesome. That's a very good point. I'm gonna unmute myself so I won't get any feedback.
Sure. Well, thank you for sharing. All right. What I want to do is talk about solutions and resources, because basically it's good to have all this information that I'm giving you. I'm kind of giving you a lot to chew on here. It's great to have this information. It's great to have this teaching to at least start the process of you kind of digesting it and so forth. But ultimately, we're a solution-based ministry. And so what that means is we've got solutions, we've got resources so that you can apply this stuff in your life. Because I'm a big believer, honestly, if you apply this stuff, it will spill over into your marriage. It will spill over with your children, your grandchildren, with your work, with your staff, with your relationships. This stuff spills over. That's the beauty of this, of God's redemption, basically, is it's not just for us. It's not just a light that I have to hide on the hill. It's actually something I can share. And I can't help but share this stuff that, there's a God who's glad to be with us, and he loves us so much. And he keeps this relationship with us bigger than problems. And when we turn to this God, we can enjoy the fruit and the life that comes from Jesus Christ. So that's a reality that just kind of spills over. So resources, what can you do? Like, how can you take all this wonderful theory and information and teaching and apply it? One way, one of the best ways actually, is a new resource that we've been working on to get into your hands. It's called Joy Starts Here, and it's the transformation zone, and it talks about, it really unpacks, what would this look like in my family, in my marriage? What would this look like in my church? What would this look like in my school? And we are actually, the book comes out here in just a couple of weeks at our upcoming conference that I'm going to talk about. So if you want to pre-order your book, go to the Life Model website, go to shopping, and you'll find this under those resources. My wife and I have been working on how to help busy married couples start joy, because I know a lot of busy married couples. And it's like, wow, Chris, I would love to have more time to do what you're suggesting here, but I don't have time for it. And my schedule's full. So that's why we created this new resource. It's 30 Days of Joy for Busy Married Couples. And basically it's 15 minutes of exercises a day that a married couple can do for 30 days, and it's designed to transform your joy. And Jen and I have been practicing these exercises ourselves to test them, make sure they work. And I have to say, we started pretty high joy already, but after doing this for 30 days, it's like we're so much more glad to be together. We're so much more relational, and we have 2 young children, and we run a very busy, full ministry, so our lives are packed. I mean, our lives are crazy in so many ways, but doing these exercises and carving out the time really has been made a huge difference for us. So two resources right here I want to recommend you look at. One of the another best resource in addition to those two would be our upcoming Joy Starts Here event. We've got a conference coming up here early October, so just several weeks away. Registration's only going to be open, I think, for another week and a half. But come see us here in Illinois. We've got all the authors who are going to be presenting, as well as my friend and colleague Bill St. Cyr, who is another wonderful guy for how do I start joy. in my school, in a school? How do I start joy in my family? How do I do this at church? The conference takes a day to really unpack this. So there's teaching, there's exercises, there's interactions. It's very much interactive event because we want you to experience it, we want you to learn it, we want you to practice it. So you can learn more about this conference. I highly recommend, if you can't make it, give this information to your pastor, give this information to your colleagues, give it to the people that that you know that could really use this in some capacity. So thrivetoday.org, just go to the Joy Starts Here conference. You can find out more details. There's still plenty of space, but the time is our time is running out there. And come back for another Joy Stream. We've got actually Bill coming to speak with us on the 19th, which is just next week. I'm very excited about this, and he's going to talk about joy starting in leadership. I focused on joy for both leaders and congregants, and very general, but Bill's going to really start to unpack more about how this relates for us leaders. And then my friend and colleague Anna Hill from the West Edmonton Church of God will be here in October after our Joy Starts Here conference. And Anna's got a powerful testimony for how joy transformed her family and her ministry. And I'll tell you what, you don't want to miss these because it really will help to make this stuff real, usable, practical in your life, in your ministry. I am taking, I have openings for small groups. Some people, especially those of us leaders or pastors, you know, we want to talk about this stuff, but we don't want to talk about this with 20, 30 people. We want to talk about this a little more, how it applies to my life with a small group. So I'm going to start offering small groups, 6 to probably 7, 8 people, where we could really practice this as a group and really look at how this applies to you and your problems and difficulties and challenges. And Carol Brown is another friend of mine. She has a joy starting blog. So check out joystarters.com. This is another fun way where you can get this information and hear it and digest it a little more. We've got so many resources. These are all so good. I don't know if you're familiar with the Gym Talks, Jesus in Mind with Dr. Wilder, but basically, as you think about how would I preach a sermon on this, and where is this stuff in Scripture, and how can I flush that out and unpack that and teach it, we've got 30 volumes of these teachings. Each volume is like 6 to 8 hours. So there's a lot of good, excellent teaching. And the most common response to people who listen to these teachings, they say things like, wow, I never heard it taught like that before. Yeah, this is really exciting. So highly recommend it. Great resource. There's a lot of good resources coming. Visit thelifemodel.org. Our newest website, which really is the kind of the starting point, go to joystartshere.com. You'll find a lot more about what we do and how to find those resources. And my friend and colleague Ed Corey has put together this Thriving Recover Your Life program, which is the way that you can bring this to your community. He's got David Tackle and Jim Wilder, all this team have put together this brilliant training. How do I bring this to my whole community? Jen and I, we lead Thrive Training, which are the 5 days of skill training. So for leaders, come to Thrive, learn the skills. We'd love to have you. But how do I get this to my whole community? That's what this wonderful program is all about. Learn more at thrivingrecovery.org. You can just see some of the great resources that are there. Ed does Joy Streams. I think his Joy Streams are going to be starting next month. So stay posted on what's going on there. I think you're just going to love what you find.
Okay. And Stephen's been wanting to cut in here since you started going through the resources. So Stephen, are you there?
Stephen, can you hear us?
What?
No.
His audio's not
Sorry,
working.
Stephen.
I know one of his questions he typed was, are any of these resources available electronically? Like the gym talks and all that stuff?
I don't think much are at the moment, but it is something we're trying to make available in the future. So much of this has just kind of been developed and tested for the last few years. So I don't know, Stephen, that we actually have a lot at the moment. The Joy Streams would be, actually. Ed has a whole lot of good joy streams that are recorded that you'd be able to view and to purchase at the Life Model website. I have recordings. All of these joy streams are available on the Thrive Today website.
You have a YouTube channel?
YouTube channels, yes. We've got a Thriving Recovery. Ed Corey has a YouTube channel. I have a Thrive Today, Chris Coursey channel where you can see how this stuff applies within a family. Those are the resources I guess I'd recommend at the moment. But we realize we're hearing from more people who want something electronically, so we're going to keep that. Oh, there you go. I hear you now.
Yeah, I unmuted my mic there.
All right.
The reason why I'm asking, I had 3 congregations in my area, and we're sort of spread out quite far, so I was hoping to be able to do some kind of a small group, but online.
Gotcha.
Hoping for people to be able to get on, so I'm going to need some resources, and it would really make it a lot easier if I was able to just cut and paste and share it with people, rather than having to retype everything. So that's one of the reasons why I'm asking.
That's helpful. You know what? If you we should email Denny and I. We could dialogue with you and try to find out what would best meet your needs for that. That's helpful to know. Yeah, you've got a good unique situation there. So.
But great material. Thank you very much for sharing all of this. This is I'm just fairly new into discovering it. And I'm looking forward to studying in quite a bit more detail. So.
Well, I'm glad you're here with us. In fact, I'm glad all of you are here. I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's given you a lot to chew on. And I think it's time for us to go. I just want to pray that your day will be full and blessed with joy. And I want to thank you for being here. I look forward to having you back. And I want to thank Denny. Denny's what makes these happen. So, Denny, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. God bless you all.